1 week season.
Welcome everybody to week 4 of Solo Ship. I'm Squirrel Patrol from 4for4 Football, joined by JM to Win from 1 week season. JM, I made a Slate verbal stumble on last week's show. I don't even know if you caught it, but I tweeted about it after the show that I momentarily forgot Jalen Hurts was on the slate. I was listing the quarterbacks that were not on the slate, and I threw Jalen Hurts in there. I'm like, no wait, Saquon. We talked about Saquon, so Hurts has got to be, got to be on the slate. And through years of doing DFS content, I know that if a standout fantasy producer is so off the radar that I forget he's on the slate, I got to be over the field. Jalen Hurts ended up being the highest scoring quarterback on the main slate. Of course, it didn't matter if you didn't have Trey Tucker, and my teams were loaded with Jacoby Meyers. How was your week 3?
Yeah, I mean, it probably sounds a bit like yours. I had a lot of outs. It was actually, you have those weeks where you get everything right, and so you got a bunch of rosters mixed and matched with everything that's right, and you just need one of them to finish at the top. And then you have other weeks where it's you don't have everything right, but you have enough right that you've got a few rosters that are really live, And so I had that where it was a handful of in several different contests, several different rosters where it was heading into the late third quarter, fourth quarter, it was hey, you know what? I'm probably the favorite to finish first or second in this contest, and none of them got there. So yeah, it was a good week in regards to had a shot, which you always want, but didn't quite get there. And yeah, turn the page this week.
Yeah, I had one of the weeks last week where my winnings were so down that I thought, oh, I must be really under the field on the early games, and then they just kept going down in the late games. I think I took every promising roster I had and made sure I got CeeDee Lamb on there because we had talked about the higher scoring game being in the afternoon, and then it immediately blew up along with CeeDee's ankle or whatever. So on to week 4.
Week 4.
We have an 11-game slate for week 4 because of the Monday night doubleheader. We also have a Sunday morning game in Dublin. So for you season-long players, make sure you check the status of Jalen Warren by 9 a.m. on Eastern time on Sunday. But yeah, so 11 games. The totals continue to be somewhat packed together. Everything's basically between 42.5 and 49.5, except for the one, the Houston game is below 40. But Houston's a 7-point favorite there. So they even have a decent implied point total. But we do have some pretty big spreads this week. We have Buffalo's favored by 15.5 over New Orleans. Detroit is favored, I think, by 10 over Cleveland. So we have some high implied point totals there. I guess what are your thoughts on the slate as a whole? With the game totals and spreads and any game environments that stick out to you.
Yeah, for me, the game environments that stand out are the Bears and Raiders and the Colts and Rams. And then for very specific reasons, the Ravens and Chiefs. The Bills one, we know Josh Allen isn't typically asked to do a lot in these games. He topped 25 DraftKings points only 5 times last year. And 2 of those were shootouts. One of those was a game where they were trailing early against the Cardinals. And then the other 2 was one of them, he had 153 passing yards, but happened to throw 4 touchdowns, right? So he can have that here, but it's hard for him to bury you for not having played him in a game like this. And then the Lions, I think that we're dealing with high price tags and a team that spreads the ball around against what's probably the best defense in the NFL right now. And so the Lions have this huge implied point total, and it won't shock me if they get there, but it's do they get there in such a way that Amon-Ra St. Brown puts up 35 or 40, or they get there in such a way that he puts up 22. Same thing with Gibbs, right? Yeah, those aren't spots I'm going to. Not that I would waste time arguing against them, but I'm kind of looking at these other games, and those are kind of the ones that stand out to me. What about you?
I think I see it the same way. I'm just prepared to feel stupid on Sunday, right? If the Bills go out there and put up 40 points, you're gonna be, oh well, of course, they had a 31.5 implied point total. But if they go out there and win, 31-0, and nothing really stands out from a fantasy side, it's not a game you necessarily want to target. I think I'll probably be at or below the field on Buffalo and Detroit. I think it'll be interesting to maybe get some Jahmyr Gibbs in there. I think James Cook will see some ownership. I think it's the way people are going to go, and that does have me a little bit torn because I'm always under the field on James Cook, and he's been cooking me so far this season. But he gets he gets his touches. He doesn't always play at outsized snap there. Right? It seems like it's a little bit of a split backfield, and as soon as I go over the field on James Cook, like Ty Johnson is going to catch like 6 passes. Ray Davis is going to punch in a touchdown, and that's the problem with the Bills, right? Like you don't know who's they have like 3 tight ends. They have a bunch of wide receivers they throw to. So there is some temptation to use Josh Allen and not even worry about running him back. Like maybe play Josh Allen and Chris Olave and call that game a day if you want to play something from that game. I think Detroit. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is kind of interesting because he's not going to see a lot of ownership. The problem is when Jahmyr Gibbs has a big day, it's often because of receptions, and it's not clear that they're going to have to be throwing the ball deep into the game. And if they do just want to run it out, they can split it between David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. So I don't know. I don't have a clear answer on those games other than I'm prepared to feel dumb on Sunday.
Yeah. What are the games that are kind of standing out to you on this one?
So you mentioned Kansas City and Baltimore. I kind of had that as my hot take. I think it could be the highest scoring game of the week. I think it could absolutely fall flat too. Like it's two. I think what we look at as two pretty decent defenses. I don't think you necessarily want to like go pick on the Chiefs defense at home. But Lamar Jackson has just, probably my favorite fantasy player of all time. Lamar Jackson, he's leading the league with 9 passing touchdowns. He hasn't had like a standout game, I think, so far in terms of rushing, but he is one of those guys who can actually break the slate from the quarterback position. It's the second highest total of the slate. And on the Chiefs side, we've gotten so accustomed to not playing Chiefs on the main slate. Like they're so rarely on the main slate. And then like Mahomes and Kelce is not the same kind of combination it used to be, like when they had Tyreek Hill. So for a while it's been kind of popular to like fade the Chiefs, right? You don't want to be one of those slappies. It's going to be playing the playing the Chiefs just because Taylor Swift, right? But I think that they're actually set up in an interesting position this week because their running game hasn't been able to do much. So maybe it is actually time to get behind Mahomes, and maybe it's more to somebody like Xavier Worthy, where people are going to have some uncertainty about playing him. I guess what do your thoughts on that game?
Yeah, I'm doing this journal thing this season where instead of it was kind of redundant, where I was writing my DFS interpretations in the NFL Edge, where other people are breaking down the games and doing their own DFS interpretations, and so we shifted over to this journal in Discord this week, where I just it's usually game level thoughts Wednesday night, and then like some roster building thoughts Thursday night, and then some other stuff, Friday night, Saturday night, but just working through my thoughts sort of publicly, right? And when I was getting through the Mahomes stuff, it was like, I thought it was going to be sneaky, and then I look at ownership this morning for the first time, and we're up there, he's projected to be one of the highest owned quarterbacks, and I was like, I didn't see that coming. I don't know how people are going to play him because I don't think they're going to feel comfortable playing Worthy. I don't think they want to play Tyquan Thornton. They don't want to play Travis Kelce. But yeah, I'm with you. So like this component of like understanding these teams well enough to be able to step back from whatever you can see on the spreadsheet is so valuable, right? Like 2 weeks ago, we talked about the Lions, like their ethos, their MO is like, we want to exert dominance over division opponents, conference opponents. Like they were playing a coach who had left them. They had just got beat by the Packers. And I kept saying, like, if the Lions get their foot on the Bears' neck, they're going to keep it there, And they ended up going for it on a 4th and goal from the 5, up 3 scores. Like, that's what we kind of expected from them in that game. And so similarly, I see this as a spot where this is such a huge game for both these teams. And because neither team wants to go to 1-3, like they'll both probably be there at the end of the season, but the Chiefs also have a game against the Lions in a couple of weeks before they get Rashee Rice back. So like they don't want to lose this one. And I see them treating it like a playoff game. And Mahomes has already talked this year about like, he usually doesn't put his body on the line until deeper into the season when they really need it in those playoff games, those late December games, whatever it is. And he's been doing that early this season because he feels like they need it. And so I just think that the game plan here, they can't run the ball, right? And I think the game plan for the Chiefs is going to be, all right, Pat, like put on the Superman cape, see if you can win this game for us. And even though this offense hasn't looked right for a couple of years, like we still have, a generational quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks of all time, who is going to be asked to take over a very important game against a defense that has been playing well. So yeah, I like this spot this late window is interesting. Like you've got the games in this late window because, like I said, I think this Indy and Rams game could be like a 38-34 game. I think San Francisco can do well against Jacksonville. I don't know. I'm stacking that up. I think Caleb Williams is one of the more attractive quarterback options. And you got this Baltimore Kansas City game. So yeah, I think this late window is going to be where a lot of my exposure is. And I think that Pat Mahomes is one of the ways to go. What are your thoughts on, you and I kind of touched on this off air, but what are your thoughts on how to play Mahomes? Because I don't think we either of us got to an answer off air.
Yeah, I might actually try to pair him most often with like Zay Flowers. Because I think that's maybe the player that breaks the game open, right? Is if Zay Flowers, is running down the field with a touchdown, turning the ball back over to the Chiefs. I think I'll probably single entry, right? Solo ship. The theme of the show, single entry. It would definitely be Mahomes and Zay Flowers. Travis Kelce, because he's so cheap, and the opportunity cost at the tight end position just isn't that high. So Kelce actually at this point, a handful of receptions and a touchdown maybe pays off his price tag, right? I'm getting Zay Flowers. I think you could take a risk on Xavier Worthy. Maybe not single entry. Maybe that's somebody, depending on how ownership projections play out, that I don't think he's going to see too high ownership. So it wouldn't necessarily take it too much to get over the field on him in like multi-entry in the multi maker type contests. Yes, you could also, I don't know. What are your thoughts on like Derrick Henry? Like Patrick Mahomes, Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, Kelce kind of roster.
Yeah, I don't usually. Well, okay, so I'll never talk down Derrick Henry. Jonathan Taylor's kind of the same thing, right? Like there are spots where it's very clear that they have a high probability of hitting. They don't always hit in those spots. See Jonathan Taylor in week 1 against Miami when it's like, oh, nobody's on Jonathan Taylor, go heavy on him, right? It's the 2 weeks after that. But they have a higher probability of hitting in those spots. And then it's pretty clear to see the spots where they have a lower probability of hitting, and they can still sometimes hit in those, but like it's low probability. So it's harder for me to like, I can't get on board with Derrick Henry as like a guy I want to play, but I could see definitely in MME, I would have some of him this week. So Williams got his first go-kart race this weekend on Saturday. It's a night race, but apparently we have to be there at 10 a.m. So it's like a whole day thing. And so I this is, I have to fly to Oakland to reserve my entries because I'm in Oregon. They took DraftKings away from us. So this week I didn't even reserve any MME because it was like, I don't want to try to add MME to, I don't know what time I'm getting home Saturday night. So I'm literally just single entry 3 max this week. And I don't think I'll have Derrick Henry in the solo ship like pool, but I wouldn't argue against it. I just don't think that's where I'm going to go. I kind of like, I've been back and forth on Worthy. Like I dropped a note in my journal last night that was like, people were so excited about this Chiefs offense coming into the year with Xavier Worthy. And now he's practiced in full 2 days and he's back this week against a bad defense in a game the Chiefs need to win. And like, nobody's actually going to play him. But also then you're like, yeah, but the reason nobody's actually going to play him is because he could literally get like 1 or 2 targets, I try to think of those things like, well, all the time you take guys that are in great spots and everything looks right and they put up like 9 points, you're not winning a tournament with that. You're not winning a tournament if Worthy gets 2 targets. So what's the difference? And the ceiling's there. And I think the math probably works, right? Because the ownership's going to be so low that if he's playing for real, like he can put up 25 points and nobody's going to be on him. But yeah, I'm still kind of up in the air on that. Like if he weren't playing, I would think Tyquan Thornton people would be scared to push that button, but he's actually looked good and been a big part of the scheme of this offense. I think he's actually still viable here, but yeah, I think that's a big question mark with Kansas City. And I'm interested to see where ownership goes because with Mahomes projecting for ownership and people not really feeling comfort with these guys, yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm with you on Kelce. Like Kelce to me looks better than he looked last year. And obviously worse than he looked like 5 years ago, but he's still able to get open and he's still difficult to bring down when he has the ball in his hand. So you could see him catching 2 touchdown passes. You know what I mean? Like he could have 5 for 50 and 2 touchdown passes. All of a sudden, like, man, Kelce's back type thing. So yeah, I'm definitely with you on this game.
Yeah. So a couple of the other game environments you mentioned, actually, I think we'll start with like the Raiders and the Bears. I think that's probably going to be the game that sees higher ownership. I think just based off of like projections and ownership that I'm seeing right now. I think Geno Smith is going to be popular. I think Caleb Williams will see some ownership as well. Obviously Trey Tucker like just went berserk last week. I guess let's like just start specifically with the Raiders. Because like, what do you think of the Trey Tucker explosion? Because like, he's going to see some ownership again this week. I had one Trey Tucker roster, I think, on DraftKings in my 150 set. I actually started deleting like when I was doing my Geno Smith stacks and I started getting Trey Tucker. I allowed one lineup and I started deleting the rest out, right? Because I don't want to, get too far, down the receiving options, right? Like, what do you think about the Trey Tucker explosion? Do you think that's repeatable? Or Brock Bowers, is probably going to project as one of the better tight ends. And then Ashton Genty, we're still waiting for the breakout game from him. And Jacoby Meyers is still there. So I guess, we'll start with the Raiders. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, funny you say that about the deleting the Trey Tucker rosters. That's another signal to me, like yours with the Jalen Hurts, where like, I forgot this guy's on the slate, I almost pulled the trigger on a bunch of Jalen Hurts last week because we have the Oracle where we have like 4 questions that Zanimir and Mike and Hyland and I all answer. And Zanimir's, one of his answers, one of them was like, Jalen Hurts is playing on a team with like the highest implied point total, and nobody's going to play him, And I was like, oh yeah. But same thing when I start like being like, no, I cannot. Why is the optimizer giving me this? Like, take this guy out of here. It's like I should probably have a little bit of him. No, I had some Geno rosters last week and went Dante Thornton because he's playing all the snaps too, and he's getting exactly 4 targets per game, right? Like his average depth of target is 21.7 or something like that. Like just these downfield throws where he's going to hit one of these. Trey Tucker had 8 targets in week 2 and, then bounced back in with these targets in week 3. I don't know that it's repeatable, but I think he's not going to hit 43 again, but like he's going to have another 20-pointer this year, maybe another 2 20-pointers this year. We saw this last year. He had like a couple big games and then it just kind of went away. But with his speed, he can definitely do it. Yeah, I mean, I think all these plays are decent and none of them are standout. Like it's not going to surprise me if Bowers puts up 25 to 30. But the fact that he did it a couple times last year sticks in our head so much. Like most of the time he was putting up 14 to 17, right? Like that's fair at his price tag at his position, but like most of the time he's not going to kill you. Jacoby Meyers put up a 30-pointer last year. He put up a 1 or 2, like 22 to 25 pointers. Most of the time he's going to put up like 13 to 17. Trey Tucker has a range of like 3 points to apparently 43 points. So yeah, like I don't know. And then Ashton Genty, it hasn't looked right. He keeps getting hit behind the line of scrimmage. I think he's dead last in the league in yards before contact per attempt because his offensive line is bad and he's not working well with it, but it could also happen, so the Raiders side is I'm still working through that. I do think I'm stacking other quarterbacks up against Pat and Caleb Williams this week, and like my decision-making of like, cause they're both cheap, so I'm like, okay, I like this quarterback. Do I like him enough to not play Caleb or Pat on this roster, or like there was a moment where I was like, man, Spencer Rattler's looks good and blah, blah, blah. And like the Bills defense isn't good and they're going to give up all these underneath throws. And then I was like, Spencer Rattler's 4,700. Like Mahomes is 6K. That's not a huge gap. Caleb Williams 50, 58, 59. Like it's not a huge gap. Just get up to these guys. But yeah, I'm still kind of working through like exactly how I want to play these spots.
I'll say, I think the Bears rushing defense, just on Ashton Genty, actually, I think I'm going to end up over the field. Because the Bears rushing defense, I think, is allowing the second most yards per attempt. So yeah, I think there is concern. For the Ashton Genty keeps getting hit, behind the line of scrimmage. But if there's a rushing defense that maybe he can get going against in his NFL career, maybe it's the Bears. I guess we should talk about the other high total game in this window that you'd mentioned, the Colts and Rams. I'm a little bit surprised because I think of them as being 2 pretty decent defenses, but it's got the highest total on the slate. I think like 50 or 49.5, depending when or where you look. I guess, Puka is going to be the guy that stands out to a lot of people from this game and on the slate as a whole. But any other thoughts on the Colts and Rams?
Yeah, the Rams are so concentrated. Devontae Adams has, I think it's 9 end zone targets. Maybe it's 8 end zone targets. Like that would be leading the NFL by like week 10. Like they just keep trying to get him the ball in the end zone. Part of the reason he has so many is because Stafford keeps missing him, and then they'll just go back to him the next play, right? So it's like again and again. But yeah, I mean, I think that the Rams' offense is so concentrated that Kyren Williams, who people are going to kind of forget about, Puka, Devontae, they're all in play. And then yeah, like to me, I'll bet on good offenses over good defenses, especially if they're playing each other, because it's an important game and they're both teams are going to be, doing well. And like good offenses don't make a lot of mistakes, and good offenses are good at getting in like second and short or third and short and then converting, right? So they just keep the drive going, which is what the Colts have been so good at this year, just keeping their drives going. And so, yeah, I think it's the type of spot where we could see points pile up, and it's not going to surprise me if both teams score in like the mid to low 20s, but it also completely won't surprise me if they're like both in the 30s. And so I'm like, let's say I build like 9 rosters this week for single entry 3 max. I will definitely have some that don't have pieces of the Colts. I might have a Rams piece on every roster because they're so concentrated, and I think they'll do well here. But I'll almost certainly have rosters that don't have a player from the Colts, but I'll also have some rosters that like overstack this game. Like my show with Pete Overzet, we built a Daniel Jones, Adonai Mitchell, Tyler Warren, Kyren Williams, Puka Nacua roster. You're just saying like, what if this is 38-34, and let's capture a bunch of these touchdowns and get the upside here. So I think that it's viable to build like that this week.
Yeah, I think so. AD Mitchell, I think is pretty cheap, 3,300,
31, yeah,
3,100. So yeah, and he's I think Alec Pierce is officially out.
Yeah,
but he was second round pick last year. I have a good friend that's a big Texas fan, and so he's you got to get AD Mitchell. Yeah, you do this fantasy stuff, got to get AD. He's the monster. But he was a second round pick last year, and we tend to go crazy for first, second, third round wide receivers, right? Their rookie season, and then 75% of them don't pan out, especially as you get to like the second and third rounds, at least from like a fantasy perspective. Like sometimes it's year 2, sometimes it's year 3, where those guys, get increased opportunity due to injury, and then they show off why they were a highly drafted wide receiver in the NFL. I had a thought about Puka Nacua, on this game that, he's just piling up receptions. Devontae Adams, I think, has a little bit of a dinged up hamstring, but expected to play until further notice. But I was wondering if this is like 2019, and I think I've done this every year since 2019, but 2018, the season, Michael Thomas set the NFL receptions record, 146 receptions. Christian McCaffrey, kept piling up receptions from the running back position that like we should have started at the end of the season. We realized we should have started every roster with Christian McCaffrey and Michael Thomas every week. Like this season, should we just be starting until Christian McCaffrey, is sitting there at 10,500? Should we be like starting our rosters with Christian McCaffrey and Puka Nacua and just figuring everything else out from there? Or is Puka maybe, not just going to come back to earth in terms of the receptions?
No, I mean, there's going to be games where he puts up 12 or 14. Like CMC has games like that too. But I think we're going to consist. Last year he was like almost always 17 plus points. This year he's been 25 plus every game. I think he's taken another step in usage, and having Devontae Adams on the other side instead of a washed Cooper Kupp makes a big difference too. And so, yeah, I think that Puka is for real, and I think that you can justify it. My thought is, going back to the start of last year, he has one game that would I always try to think in terms of like the score you get if you roster the guy, but also if you don't play him, how scared are you, right? And last year he put up one game where you couldn't have won without it, and it was a 42-44 shootout against the Bills. So not to say that he can't get there in a different type of game environment, but it's just unlikely. So I'm fine. I'm not going to be scared to have rosters without Puka, is what I'm getting at, because I think he's going to put up 20 to 25, maybe 28, 29 points, but at his price tag, just the salary spent and what that constricts on other spots in your roster. I'm not I have to start my rosters with him, but it also won't surprise me if I have, 9 rosters built and Puka's on 5 of them, 6 of them. The ones that don't have him have Devontae or Kyren Williams to be like, oh, maybe the touchdowns don't flow through Puka, they flow through somebody else. And so, I'm not looking at this as people are overreacting. It's going to come back down to earth. I think he's still, what did I say? I said earlier in the week, I think there's definitely a clear opportunity that by the end of the season, we realized that Puka was still underpriced at this point. I think he's going to be 85 or 87 or 89 even. And we're like, I remember when. Yeah, I don't know if I'm still here or if you're gone. All right, but yeah, I'm definitely on board with Puka here.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'm on board. Right. I'm definitely on board with that.
So I guess we should touch on at least something in the early part of the slate, right? The 1 p.m. games. And I think the thing that's standing out in the morning games or the 1 p.m. games for people on the East Coast like me, but we have two rookie running backs, who were previously arguably backups, but they're elevating into a potentially bigger role. Cam Scatterboo with the Giants, Ryan Hampton with the Chargers. They're playing each other in the same game. There's not a huge difference in price. I'll say Scatterboo is much cheaper than Hampton on FanDuel. On DraftKings, I think it's 5,500 for Scatterboo, 5,900 for Hampton. We're also seeing the first Jackson Dart game against the Chargers in the same game. I guess thoughts on that game and the rookie run.
Yeah, the Chargers are another offense that I like here. Obviously, they had the high pass rate over expectations. The Giants have gotten gashed on the ground. The Giants have this scary, ferocious front four, but nothing else really. So every time where they're blocked or where Herbert has enough time, he's going to find somebody. So I think the Chargers do well here. I have a lot of faith and respect for the Chargers defense, but also what makes them good, I think, is interesting in terms of they don't have a scary pass rush, especially with Khalil Mack out. The Giants have this awful offensive line, but Andrew Thomas should be back to full health at this point. He played on a snap count last week. And so then they're really hard to dissect on the back end. But I just think Jackson Dart, this matchup fits Jackson Dart better than Russ, because Russ, all he can do is throw deep. And I also think, again, the things we were talking about with the Chiefs or the Lions a couple weeks ago, where we can kind of step out of what we can see on a spreadsheet. I just think we've seen Cam Scatterboo, right? Just lower his helmet and try to run guys over. That brings an energy to the team. Jackson Dart, now you get the rookie starting instead of this, washed up old guy in Russ. That you read reports, teammates don't like Russ since he's left Seattle. They think he's corny. They think he's separated from the team. So now you got the rookie in there. I just think that it'll bring a different energy to the Giants, to where even though the matchup's tough and they're not a great team, I think they can be competitive enough here that the Chargers have to continue to play throughout the game is what I'm getting at. So yeah, I think Amari and Hampton had basically all the touches in week 1 and bombed, so I'm surprised that people are just so on board. And I've seen a lot of breakdowns of how many snaps, snap share and touches after Najee went out. But Kamani Vidal was inactive, and he's actually the number 2. Hassan Haskins isn't the number 2. He's there for special teams. Vidal's going to be active this week. So yeah, I think that there's certainly opportunity for these running backs to disappoint. Scatterboo in the matchup and isn't doing exactly what everyone's expecting. But yeah, I like both plays plenty here this week.
Yeah, I might end up under the field. I think they're playable. I do have some concerns. So last week, right, was actually Kenneth Walker and Jordan Mason week, as well as being, before it was Trey Tucker week. It was Jordan Mason and Kenneth Walker week. I think it's a much more precarious situation with the rookie running backs. It's not necessarily a great matchup on necessarily on either side. Probably much better for the Chargers. But I think my favorite guy from this game might be Justin Herbert. If I'm gonna go to this game, maybe play a Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen, and hope that, like you said, that the Giants maybe come out with a little bit more energy, but that's benefiting the game environment as a whole, and thus Justin Herbert. I have some concerns, especially with rookies, right? This is not veterans like Kenneth Walker and Jordan Mason. These are rookies, and so just because the guy in front of them went down, we still have Evan Singletary with the with the Giants. Yeah, and so obviously, I think Hampton and Scatterboo are good plays on paper. I think that they'll get increased work, but it won't necessarily be the work that projections are showing, right? When somebody has to decide a run share or whatever, when they're making a projection, I think they could be a little bit over projected. I guess any other game environments that you wanted to touch on, maybe Philadelphia and Tampa Bay, is a game that has some big name players that we didn't touch on at all. Anything you like there, or anything from any other game?
Yeah, I want to mention Kyren Williams, Ashton Genty, two guys we've talked about, are not priced much higher than those two, and those two are going to soak up most of the ownership. So I think that's interesting as well. And I like those plays, but like you said, there's notes of caution with them as well. Eagles, I think, this is a team that they've had trouble with, the Bucs, and it's hard to run against the Bucs. And they finally got aggressive last week out of necessity. But AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts were both vocal after the game about feeling like that's how the Eagles should be playing more often. So I think this is a spot where we could see Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown do well again. I'm definitely on the AJ Brown train this week in that game. I don't know if I want to bet on like the whole game environment, but all the injuries on the Bucs offensive line, and then no Mike Evans, and but I wouldn't be against it, and then nothing else major to touch on. You have any thoughts on that Philadelphia Tampa game?
Actually, I was going to go back to Kyren Williams first. The running back pricing is a little bit interesting this week because there's a $600 gap between Bucky Irving, I think is $6,900, and then the next running back is Kyren Williams at $6,300. So it's actually a pretty good price point for Kyren. I think that's somebody he's going to show up in projections. Like when people start running lineups with constraints and groups, they're going to get some Kyren Williams. They're not going to know why, but it's because it's a price thing. He's at 6,300, and it takes 600 more to get up to the next priced running back in Bucky Irving. Philadelphia and Tampa Bay. It's interesting because it is a game that could go up, but I'm probably not going to bet on. I just think those afternoon games are so there's so many games in the afternoon that I like better than that game. That I'm probably going to focus on those games. And this isn't necessarily a game that I want to get a one-off player from either. I think if I had to pick somebody from that game, it would probably be Puka, who's just looking good. And I think there's an argument if Mike Evans is having to leave, Mike Evans is going to be out, but Chris Godwin is not back yet or is not all the way back. That could leave Puka in a good position, even if it's a tough matchup. So he's probably the guy that I like best from that game. I guess maybe we'll touch briefly on Washington and Atlanta too, with Marcus Mariota starting again for Washington. His price is more than it was last week. It's 5,000 instead of 4,000, but he was a guy I was high on last week. I think I'm going to be high on him again this week, just because the Washington offense last week I think could have done a lot more. It's just they put so much behind the running backs, the three running backs who all did pretty well, and that ended some drives very well for Washington with 60-yard touchdown runs. But it wasn't a great for fantasy scores. But Mariota again kind of showed that he can both throw the ball and gain some yards, on the ground with his legs. He scored a rushing touchdown. Thoughts on anything with Washington and Bijan Robinson and the Falcons on the other side?
Yeah, I mean, Bijan, maybe some Darnell Mooney. I'm not super high on the Falcons in general, just because of the way they've looked. That can always turn around. I don't have arguments against it. In large field play, I would definitely have some exposure. Mariota, totally fine with that one. I don't know if I'm going there because, again, I always like to have a stacking partner just from the math perspective of getting two spots right is more valuable than getting one. And I take a guy who hits less frequently but gets me two spots right, if I know where that second spot is. If there's guesswork, then just getting one spot right has value. But I'm also definitely fine with Mariota. I haven't messed around with any Mariota rosters because I kind of thought Jaden Daniels would play, and we got the news this morning that it's going to be Mariota, right? So I'll mess around with some rosters of Mariota tonight. Maybe slip that into my single entry 3 max as well. But no strong takes on that one yet.
Any other thoughts on the week?
No.
All right. We'll leave it there. Good luck to everybody in week 4. Hope to see you at the top of the leaderboards, and we'll catch you next week.